as we were comparing municipal law with international law, we have already said that their sources are completely diverse. Municipal law has many institutions: legislative, executive, judiciary, and international law does not have it. So, how to make law? What are the sources of international law? In which law books should you be looking if you're looking for certain laws? The answer is given by the Statute of International Court of Justice. International Court of Justice is one of the 6 main branches of the United Nations. What are the rest 5? Security Council.
Secretariat.
The Secretariat. Trusteeship Council. Good. Where? ECOSOC and the General Assembly. Okay. So among those 6 main organs, International Court of Justice is also established by the UN in 44. I guess the statute is adopted in 46, if I'm not mistaken. The 38th article of ICJ statute tells us about the sources of international law. UN is established by a treaty, as you know, the UN Charter, and it is signed by a huge number of states. It's almost adopted globally. ICJ as well. Because there is such an international agreement on this paper, we can simply say that, yes, those sources are the source of international law. And this is a law class. This means you have to learn those names and articles by heart. Sorry for you. It's not so complicated. Come on. Well, according to that statute, by the way, this slide is a direct copy-paste of that text. Those are not my sentences. Those are the sentences of the statute. The court, whose function is to decide in accordance with international law such disputes as are submitted to it, shall apply. Now, ICJ, International Court of Justice, is there in order to solve the disputes in between nations. Well, it's going to find solutions to their disputes, but what are their sources? When you go to a regular court in a municipal system, you know that the judge has certain law books to look for the system, the legal infrastructure. How about the judges of ICJ? So, where they're going to search for their solutions are those 4 subclauses. The first source is international conventions, whether general or particular, establishing rules expressly recognized by the contesting states. International conventions, by the way, for treaties, there are multiple names. Convention means treaty, which means agreement, which also means pact, memorandum of understanding, and so on. There are several. Statute itself, charter, yes? That's also, at the moment, you can just accept it like that. They're all treaties. They're all international agreements. Okay? So the primary source of international law is international treaties. The second one is international custom as evidence of a general practice accepted as law. So customary law. International custom. What's the Turkish word for that? Another name? Do you remember? That's correct. Teamül. What else? What? Örfi hukuk. Okay. So, international conventions are written. And international customary law is unwritten. By the way, I have seen someone raising their hand up. Sorry, Murat, yes. I'll come to them one by one, deeper. It is, that's true. That's true. Let's just name them here, and then I'll tell about them one by one. The third source is about the general principles of law recognized by civilized nations. of course, we can start debating them. Who are civilized nations? And so on. Well, we don't need to become that philosophical in this class. We'll just talk about what general principles are. And the fourth source is about judicial decisions and the teachings. So, there are four sources: treaties, customary law, general principles, and the fourth one is composed of two pieces. That's judicial decisions and teachings. All right? You have to keep them always in your mind. The primary sources are those two, international treaties and international custom. And general principles, teachings, and judicial decisions are the secondary sources. Although it's not mentioned here, there are some other sources still of international law, like the decisions of international organizations. When United Nations, for instance, makes a decision, this can also start influencing the international law. But officially accepted ones are mentioned in ICJ Statute, Article 38, those four sources. By the way, here in Clause D, the sentence reads, subject to the provisions of Article 59, judicial decisions and the teachings of the most highly qualified publicists of the various nations as subsidiary means for the determination of rules of law. So, subject to the provisions of Article 59, what is that? Article 59 reads that the decision of the court, which means ICJ, has no binding force except between the parties and in respect of that particular case. Just for general knowledge, keep in mind, when ICJ makes a decision for a case, the decision is only binding for the parties of that case, no one else. That's also another thing you have to remember. So let's start with the first source, international conventions. The most important feature of treaties is that they are written. Plus, they are signed. And they are ratified. Or we can also talk about the accession. I'll tell you what they are. Well, treaties make international law, that's for sure. The thing is that, which treaties make international law? Bilateral treaties don't make international law. Bilateral treaties, what does bilateral mean? IR students, you know it, of course. Yes? Between only two states, of course. If an agreement is concluded in between just two states, it's binding only on those two states, and it does make a huge impact on the rest of the states, of course. But if an agreement is multilateral, then multilateral treaties can make international law. They can start making an impact on international relations. Multilateral, they can be regional, they can be global. An agreement made only in Asia is still an international agreement. European agreements, they're regional, of course, still they're accepted as international agreements. We can also talk about global agreements. They're also international, like World Health Organization's establishment is also made by a founding treaty signed globally, and that's also an international. So international includes both regional and global. Keep this in mind. And bilateral treaties do not make international law. Treaties are signed and ratified. That signature plus ratification gives us the formal consent of the state. First of signature, who signs the treaty? The leader, the representative. There are natural representatives or indirect representatives. Natural representatives are people like the president, prime minister, ministers like Minister of Foreign Affairs, or diplomats, ambassadors. They're direct, natural representatives of the state. There are also indirect representatives, or, well, at the moment you're just a citizen of Turkish Republic, but you don't represent your state. However, if you're given a written authorization that this person is going to sign this treaty on behalf of Turkish state by the foreign ministry or by prime ministry that we don't have anymore, I always forget, well, by the president's office, then you also become the representative of your state. So first of all, signature. Secondly, the signature can also be put there by a crazy leader, by an insane leader. Then what's going to happen? Will the entire nation be bound by them? That's why we also have the ratification step at that point. What does it bring? Ratification is the approval of the constitutionally approved organ. The constitutional approved organ can be, well, in Turkey it's simple. We simply say that it's the parliament. But what if there are two cameras, for instance? Change the Senate and the House and House of Commons and whatever. So whichever is constitutionally authorized to do the ratification, the treaty is ratified by them. Still, what does ratification mean? Ratification is after the representative signs the treaty, that treaty text is copied, and the copies are given to the representatives, parliament members. They read it one by one, and they decide if this treaty is for the best interests of your nation or not. And then the parliament votes it. Do we really need to, or do we really want to adopt this treaty for our country? If it is accepted by the parliament or whatever that authorized organ is, then it is adopted. All right? And that adoption process depends, of course, from country to country or from the nature of the treaty to another. It can require a simple majority or it can require a qualified majority. So those are the details. And on treaties, it is possible to make reservations. It's possible to withdraw from a treaty. Amendments can be done, modifications can be done. Actually, after this, we will be studying law of treaties, and then we'll go deep into them. As I see you're slowly a little bit bored, just a little bit more patience. After we talk about sources, we can just stop there and continue in the next class about the law of treaties, all right? Then I can skip them. We'll already talk about them during the law of treaties. We don't need to mention them at the moment. Customary international law. What is customary law? First of all, customary law is unwritten, unlike law of treaty, unlike treaties, international customs. Those customs can be regional or global. Regionality, globality, both of them are internationality. And still, what is customary law? Customary law is that under the same conditions, when the states are behaving in the same way as if there is a written law, then this is their custom, but there is nothing written. So they behave as if there's something written over there, okay? So they derive from general practice accepted as law. Under the same conditions, the states behave the same. Harbors are your territories. Well, actually, there is regulation related to harbors, by the way. I don't need to confuse you. I'm just trying to give you an easy example. Let's say there is no regulation related to harbors, and nations just leave their harbors open for the foreign ships. Although there is nothing written, they have never promised to keep their harbors open to each other, they just do so. This is a custom then. Under the same condition is that foreign ship is approaching to your harbor, and the implementation is that you keep the harbor open for foreign ships. This is custom. So this is when all the states are behaving. So consistency is one critical element of customary law. And there also must be the belief that it is required by law. So if we were to write laws on this issue, we would have written it in such a way. Opinio juris. believe that this is law. So, actually, it's still a little bit complicated. I mean, if you're trying to tell that something is custom, you need evidence for that, of course. You need to tell that I name this as a custom because this state, that state, and those states are behaving such a ways, and you have then evidences. You can give examples to them. Because it's unwritten, it's a little bit complicated. So it's limited. And, well, customary international law is only applicable to those states that are parties to certain, the other way around. Treaty law is applicable on their own parties, of course. If you sign the treaty, then treaty is binding upon you. How about in customary law? It's not like that. If you're behaving like that, then it is binding upon you. Okay? And if you are rejecting it, it is not binding upon you anymore. Actually, there's an example to that, but I'm not sure if you have ever noticed that or not. At the moment, Turkey is not a party to one treaty that's known as UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of Sea. Turkey is not a party to that. But many other nations are parties to them. Especially around the Mediterranean room, we share one sea altogether. All the others adopt UNCLOS, Turkey does not. And each time any of those states make a move in line with UNCLOS, Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs prepares notices for the UN saying that we have seen that Egypt has made a move in line with UNCLOS and we don't recognize it. Why Turkey is all the time telling UN that it is rejecting UNCLOS? Turkey is trying to prevent that. UNCLOS becomes customary law and starts being binding on Turkey. Turkey doesn't want to be bound by UNCLOS. Therefore, each time someone does something in line with UNCLOS, Turkey rejects it, protests it. Well, it's not a protest, but rejects it, does not recognize it. So, written laws can become customary law. Customary law is unwritten, but unwritten laws can also become customary law. This means even though you are not a party to one treaty, it can start binding you. All right? There are some general principles of international law. The thing is that, well, what's the general principle, what is not, is quite controversial. Of course, scholars are debating on some of them. The thing is that there are, at least in this class, we can use some of them, like jus cogens principle. Have you ever heard of that, jus cogens? Jus cogens is a principle which says that nations are allowed to do treaties with each other in any field, in health, in sports, in culture, whatever they want. But there's one limit. The limit is jus cogens. The agreement cannot be violating human rights. Well, it is possible for nations to make an agreement in order to prevent slavery, because it's pro-human rights. But the nations cannot make an agreement saying that, like Turkey and Georgia makes an agreement saying that each year we're going to meet twice and go to Russia to capture 200 slaves for each. No, it cannot be done. That's against human rights. So it is against general principles of law. It is against jus cogens. So there are certain principles that shape how international law is made or implemented. All right? And the last one, I guess, okay. The last one has two pieces. I don't have it on my slides. Do you remember the two pieces? One of them is judicial decisions. The other one is teachings. Judicial decisions is already quite open for you. For international courts, they make decisions, and in time they become international law. How about teachings? How do teachings become international law? let's imagine, by the way, in that slide, it was saying you have seen, let me find it. Here. Teachings, by the way, not just teachings of anyone, teachings of the most highly qualified publicists. So prominent professors and so on, all right? One of those prominent professors, imagine one of our professors write an article about how international law shall be used under alien invasion. Well, it can be written, why not? And then you're smiling already. But what if that invasion really takes place? What's your source then, how to use international law? Your only source becomes that crazy article. Then there is a guideline. Someone has already thought about it. Someone has already produced theories on how to implement international law under such conditions, if we're going to unite, if we're going to divide, what to do, and what are our limits, what are our rights, is already given. So this is about teachings. Enjoy the rest of your day.